web panel. As we celebrate our 20th anniversary, we continue to tackle the most pressing issues of our time. Today, we found ourselves at a historic and volatile turning point. It has been exactly 1 month since the conflict between US, Israel, and Iran escalated into an open warfare. There is no shadow war. It's a direct military confrontation between these three actors, but it also affects the entire region. So, in response to the US-Israeli attacks, Iran has not hesitated to target US facilities and critical infrastructure within Gulf countries. Interestingly, we are observing a differentiated strategy from Tehran. While some states are being pressured diplomatically, others, like the UAE, are facing much harsher military targeting. So, furthermore, the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has once again turned the global energy supply into a high stakes economic bargaining chip. All of these developments go to the very heart of the Gulf security architecture. Today, we are joined by three exceptional experts to analyze these dynamics from the ground up. I'm honored to welcome our guests, Professor Abdullah Baboud from the Gulf International Forum. Thank you for joining us, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, so he has a problem with... Okay, I will text him. Okay, Dr. Ali Bekir from Qatar University. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Ali.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Betül Doğan Akkaş from Ankara University. Thank you also for your participation, Dr. Betül. Okay, we will have a Q&A after the presentations conclude. Actually, I was planning to start with Professor Baboud, but since he has some technical issues, we are going to start with... okay, he came. Are you able to hear us, Professor? Can you hear us, Professor, right now? No? Okay. So let's begin with Dr. Ali Bekir from Qatar University. So I'd like to ask you about the strategic dimension of this war, about the strengths and failures of the Gulf security architecture, and how likely do you see that, about the possibility of a new regional security architecture emerging from this today's dimension? Thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be with you, and I'm very happy that we are discussing now a very timely topic. Concerning your question, I think that, of course, given that this is an unprecedented moment in terms of regional security, not at least since the US-Iraq war in 2003, now the GCC states are under attack from Iran all at the same time. This is unprecedented, historically speaking. So I think that we should first give the credit for the GCC countries for their defensive posture and restraint until now, despite all the provocations from the Iranian side, and also despite the disinformation that tries to drag these countries into the current war. Until now, the GCC states preserve their defensive posture and try to absorb the shock and attacks given their current situation. So I think that this is a very wise choice for the GCC states. Otherwise, we would have been talking about a very expensive type of war. Already the Iranians retaliated after being attacked by the US and Iran against 12 regional countries. So these countries showed restraint until now, most of them. And This is something that we should give credit to. So, second thing, uh, I would say that also the GCC countries, collectively speaking, they performed very well on the defensive side, given that most of the people, they didn't at least anticipate that they would perform this well in terms of intercepting most of the Iranians' missiles and drones initiated toward their country. Of course, in this sense, those who are defending are usually in a more critical position than those who are attacking. And we know very well that no matter how your defenses are strong, if you are under an overwhelmed type of missile or drone attack, then ultimately it will fail. But in the case of the Gulf countries, they intercepted most of the thousands of missiles and drones targeted towards them. Unfortunately, some of these missiles and drones managed to hit critical infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, energy facilities, distillation water, and this is where the restraint and the defensive posture of the GCC countries have been tested. I guess that these countries are aware that despite having the offensive option in their hand, and we should not forget that at least 3 or 4 countries from the GCC have the most advanced fighter jets in the region, if we put Israel aside, and those collectively can amount to 2,000 fighter jets. This is a huge offensive capability. They didn't resort to this option yet, and this is quite wise given that this would escalate the conflict. However, the Iranian side is probably understanding the restraint as a weakness, which he shouldn't mix this with the current situation. And I think that if we are not going to reach a resolution of the war, in a short time, then most probably those GCC countries would still have their offensive option to their side. Now, having said this, I would like to point out to the weaknesses in the security mentality and security preparedness for this war. As you know, everybody was aware that a potential war is going to happen, given that first, the Iranians they didn't show real or serious willingness to reach an agreement, despite the very several opportunities that they had following the swift 12 days war with Israel. Second, the Israelis were preparing very much to seize the opportunity to attack the Iranians, knowing that they are currently under an immense pressure and very vulnerable to outside attack, especially following the 2024-2025 Israeli attacks that wiped out the Iranian air missile defense systems. And third, given the US was already preparing for war, sending more warships, sending more jets and military equipment. So the atmosphere was signaling that there is a war coming. Despite this, I think that the GCC countries did several mistakes. First, they didn't signal their red lines. So if I don't know your red line or what is your red line, so I may cross it and I may do something that harm you, and still you wouldn't be able to respond because I already did what I did. So the GCC countries' first mistake is not to signal their red line in terms of potential war. They could have said that these are our red lines to all parties who would get involved in a war, whether Iran, whether Israel, whether the US. If any of these countries crossed these red lines, then they should expect consequences. So not announcing this, not calculating this, put the GCC countries in a very disadvantageous situation, in my opinion, and they could have done this. Second problem in the security mentality of the GCC states is that they didn't prepare for alternatives. I mean, for probably 20 years, there have been discussions on the possibility of Iran closing Strait of Hormuz. And this, scenario increased, and the possibility of this scenario increased during the last 2 years. But despite this, several GCC countries didn't prepare for alternative, knowing that their sole existence is dependent on their oil or gas exports from the strait. In this case, for example, Kuwait and Qatar. So now, for example, the strait is closed. Qatar energy facilities and LNG facilities are hit. They cannot export. So what's the alternative in this case? There is zero alternative. They could have avoided this by taking this scenario seriously and working on it. And we have warned several times about the potential of such scenario happening. Third, they could have also worked collectively in terms of political messaging, in terms of mediating effort, in terms of central collective defense command that utilize from their defensive equipment in order to face such overwhelming attacks from Iran in case they happen. And they have a lot of advanced military equipment. They didn't do this, unfortunately. So this was also, I think, a weakness, and this is a point that put them in a very critical situation that we are seeing at the current moment. Also, this is a very serious mistake from the GCC countries, especially those who depend on playing mediatory role vis-a-vis US and Iran, meaning that Qatar and Oman. Those countries, as well as the other countries, assumed that adopting a neutral role in a potential war between Iran and Israel or Iran and the US would shield them, and that mediation efforts that have been paid during the last decades would also favor their part vis-a-vis Iran. But when the war started, the Iranians totally ignored this posture and these facts, and also put them under attack. So I will stop here, and maybe if you have questions, I can follow up later. And I hope I didn't take much time.
Thank you, Doctor. It was a perfect timing, actually. Thank you. And now I think Professor Babut fixed his technical problems. Are you able to hear us, sir?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. Great. Now I'd like to turn to you, sir. Given this 1 month of open conflict, how are the Gulf states are navigating the storm? What are their political reactions and projections for the near future? The floor is yours. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Mustafa, and I apologize to you and the colleagues in the panel, and also to the audience for the technical problems. But thanks for your colleagues also who helped me with that. And I really appreciate your kind invitation. Well, the Gulf states were caught off guard here. Although, there were escalation in terms of language, and we have seen the rhetoric coming from both sides. We have also seen that last month there was a war as well, the 12 days war. But the Gulf states, as has been explained by my good friend Dr. Ali Bakir, were not prepared. And I don't think anybody expected there's going to be a war of this magnitude again. And the Gulf states were caught between, they became almost a victim of geography, and also a victim of their own alliance and their own security partners. So their reaction in the beginning, they first of all were a bit critical of the US entering into this war with little regards to their own security. We could see that they felt that this is going to be, this war is going to add to more escalation and to more devastation, which is going to affect their economy. And I think they try to avoid being entangled into this. That's another strategy they try to do, despite the fact that maybe they have been pushed one way or the other by the United States to enter the war or to help it with its with its efforts in the war, one way or the other. The other thing that they have also done is they try to signal to Iran that and to their security partners that they are not allowing their bases to be used for attacks in Iran. They are not allowing their skies to be used, and the not allowing also any military presence in these Gulf states on their American bases to be used against Iran. Despite all of that, Iran, as another, if you like, strategy for in their response to the war, they attacked the Gulf states, and they started to attack their infrastructure as well, not only military, U.S. military bases. And some of this is really critical infrastructure, whether it is oil and gas, especially as we hear about the Ras Lafan in Qatar, but also threatening to attack even desalination plants and other critical infrastructure for the Gulf state. So some of the Gulf states have become much more critical of Iran, although they are still hedging and they're still trying to avoid being direct party to this war. But they have been rather critical and, of course, condemned what Iran has done in terms of attacking Gulf territories and infringing their sovereignty. Some of them as well were a little bit reticent in the way they expressed their opinion, and they tried not to antagonize Iran. And here we see almost a deviation between the Gulf states. Yes, they don't want the war to continue. Yes, they don't want the escalation to go any further. But because of Iran attacks on their sovereignty and their land, and also because of what we mentioned, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf states have become a little bit more vocal. But while they are doing that, they're trying to avoid as much as possible to stay out of the war. But they reverted to their traditional ways of doing things, and that is to help escalation, build alliances, try to put pressure not only on Iran, but also on the United States and Israel to end this war. Although we hear from time to time that some of the Gulf states, and I don't know to what extent this is true, were actually nudging the US to go further. I don't, it's difficult to judge on this, but I think what the Gulf states would want to see that the post-war era is going to be different from what it was and from what it is now. And they would want to see that, there are solutions to the lingering problems with Iran, which included, of course, their beside their nuclear program, it also includes their missile program. It also includes their support for their alliance and proxies in the region, whether it's in Iraq or Lebanon or Yemen. They want to put pressure on Iran to talk about these issues and ensure that the Gulf states are living in safety and security, because what they have gone through is immensely disturbing, and of course this has been a challenge on their own security and their sovereignty, and all the works that they have expended in the last few decades of trying to build their economies, trying to diversify their economies, and created these visions and created this image of the Gulf being, a stable region in the Middle East, or one of the most stable regions in the Middle East, trying to attract international investment. This has all been shattered. So obviously, and the costs are going to be really high for this. Obviously, we don't know where the war is going and how far it is going to go, but and what extra damage there's going to be. But I think there is already enough damage that's been done to the Gulf states, and therefore they want to see that, or they are signaling that they want more than just the ceasefire. They want to ensure that Iran also follows this, as I mentioned, to talk about their missile program, to talk about their nuclear, and also to talk about their support for their alliance. And they want to be part of this. They don't want to be excluded from any negotiations with Iran. Having said that, I think also the relationship with the United States will also be tested. It is being tested at the moment because, as we said, this is a war that was not encouraged, or it wasn't welcomed by the Gulf states, and the United States took this decision without consulting with them, and they didn't take their concerns into their calculations, and they haven't really protected the Gulf states as much as they did, for example, with Israel. And therefore, I think there are a lot of question marks about the relationship with the US, and also about the viability of having military bases, US military bases in the region. I don't think it's going to end. I don't think this is going to be, diversion completely from the US. The US will still remain as an important partner, but I think the Gulf states will try as much as possible to diversify their relationship and to put some conditions on US presence in the region, because that presence has actually, got them in this problem, as it were, and they became a victim for that. And I think they try and diversify their relationship and their hedging with global powers, whether it is Russia, China, India, but also other regional countries like, Turkey and Egypt in the future. But and I think they will also try and do something vis-a-vis their own security architecture, which has been mentioned by Dr. Ali. It's been on the agenda for a long time, but for their own reasons, they haven't been able to move that forward. So this is probably a chance to do so. It's a wake-up call for the Gulf states. So I think there's going to be a lot of calculations here. And perhaps I should stop here, and happy to take other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for staying in the time limit. Also, your points were amazing. Thank you for your insightful presentation. Now I'd like to turn to Dr. Betül Doğan Akkaş. Dr. Betül, please provide us with your general assessment about the ongoing situation, and also to look at the maritime dimension and regional proxy issue, especially about Houthis and Red Sea. Could you also provide us with your insights about that issue? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa Hocam. Thank you for your time and for your invitation for this very timely event. It's nice to be with Dr. Abdullah and Dr. Ali. I would like to start with the general assessment of the situation after a month of war in Gulf. As previous professors mentioned, it was an expected but also an unexpected situation by the Gulf monarchies, since they did have certain preparations in terms of their deterrence and their alliances, but this scope of targeting from Iran wasn't on their list. Because since the establishment of GCC monarchies in the 1960s, 70s, the expectation of the conflict with Iran is mostly on the norm of sectarian polarity or their proxy wars across the region. It was more like geopolitical tension without literally going into a real war or shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. The primary problem is now the idea of Gulf deterrence. The deterrence of the Gulf monarchies were based on two primary sources, as Dr. Ali mentioned. The idea of US security umbrella, which is based on the idea that if there is anything happening in the Gulf land, then US will be there to protect it, including the airstrikes and all sorts of maritime security issues. And the second deterrence is actually a capital of deterrence, which comes from the energy sector. Since these monarchies are very critical sources of natural gas and oil, the way they are threatened by any regional actor that might be threatened the global market. And it's not only about energy market, because it's itself is a source of many other sectors. We have impact of oil and LNG prices in almost every sector in the global economic market now. So this is the two capital of deterrence for the Gulf monarchies, and both of them are not working at the moment. US bases are like magnets of insecurity, as if they are not there for the opposite, and their complete reasoning of being in the Gulf is not functioning now. And it's not only about the way they are used in the discourse of US. It's more on the side that the security of Middle East is defined from a different perspective by the Trump administration at the moment. If we had another US president, we could have more functioning US security umbrella for the Gulf monarchies. It seems like priority of US security framework is more oriented to their not their homeland security. It's more like Israeli targets in the region, what sort of interest Israel has, then they can reorient it according to that. Because insecurity in the Gulf is a perfectly unmanageable situation for US administration. They had to deal with this preemptively in advance without triggering Iran for an attack on the Gulf monarchies. So this is a big problem in the first source of deterrence. In the second source of deterrence, which we mentioned, the energy capital, it comes actually with a bigger picture for Gulf monarchies, because these are very established economic power actors of the global market. They do sell oil and LNG, but also their investments across the world means a lot for many states. Their economic independence comes from the natural sources, but they do rebuild this economic independence over different sectors. And once it's not secure anymore, the idea of a stable, secure, and economically independent Gulf is now not in the same position. With 1 month ago, it was a more powerful narrative. Now we have a lot of problems around this narrative. This will bring further economic problems. Even if the war is ended tomorrow, then we have to see other actions from the Gulf states to rebuild, restructure this image. And this is a very important side effect of the war, as the political economy of the Gulf states are really crucial in their political regimes and stability. And this is why I believe the narrative in the Gulf, I'm sure Professor Babut and Ali Bakr, they will mention more in the Q&A regarding that. It's more oriented to bringing diplomacy and peace back as much as possible, like as much as easier. Because the more we have the war going on, then we will have more impacts, negative impacts on the Gulf monarchies. But here is a problem where we see the insecurity relationship between Gulf and US, or the Trump administration at the moment. The narrative of the GCC Secretary General or the Gulf leaders, although they do mention US as an actor, which didn't conduct all the role that it's supposed to do, it's more targeting Iran. Okay, Iran definitely is now a problem for Gulf security, but the umbrella of all these insecurities is actually coming from the regional atmosphere since the 7th of October. The regional hegemony or status quo ongoing, all political situations in the region are somehow oriented to Israeli interests. This is why, although all these GCC monarchies, they call for de-escalation, they are ready to go to table, they are ready to talk, negotiate, their partner in this is not able to do it because it's under attack since the 7th of October. I think this is why we will see a different understanding of Israel and Iran in the Gulf political spectrum once the war is over. It might completely change the idea of regional security. We might see more collective actions from the Gulf monarchies, or we might see further individual militarization of the Gulf monarchies, because we may not see the same response of monarchies. Individually, they could go for different directions in their relationship with Israel, with Iran, and with US. In this case, although this war is a shared threat perception across the Gulf, because Iran targeted everyone without differentiating Qatar or Oman or Bahrain, then the unified understanding of Gulf threat perception now might disappear in the post-war period. Then we might see a different understanding of security, as we have done with the Abraham Accords previously. We might see a different understanding of US security umbrella or Israeli role in the regional politics. And this will bring definitely a new reading of regional geopolitics. One of the issues, as you mentioned now, is the proxies of the war. Iran is functioning as a state which cooperates more with its non-state actors to strengthen its power, its strategic power, its geopolitical power. You could bring this as a sectarian polarity or real factual military power, but we have seen this before in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Yemen. And in the current version of the war, in the current stage of the war, in the last 3 days, we have seen Houthis more actively engaging with the situation. Before, they declared that they are with Iran, which is defining them in the axis of resistance, but they didn't had any attack before. And they also declared that the enemy for them is just like Iran, is anyone who supported US regional policies or military bases, hosting US military bases. In this regard, Houthis collectively defined Gulf monarchies as an enemy. Which is quite challenging for the regional security, because Saudi Arabia had a diplomatic communication with Houthis in the last 3 years. This was actually the reason where we had a secure north border of Yemen. This is also how Emirati is withdrawn from Yemen, and we had more a new era in Yemen war, which is less dominated by UAE, but more in the form of a Houthi or Saudi dominated Yemeni situation. So there was this idea in Yemen that Houthis are talking to Gulf and they are in the negotiation table. Even if we have a peace in Yemen, we could do this communication between Gulf monarchies or any Gulf state with Houthis. And if we have Houthis heavily involved in the situation, backing Iran, which they will do according to their last strikes in Bab el-Mandeb, then we will have also a very difficult situation for Saudi border security in the south and ongoing Yemeni war, because then the ongoing process in Yemen will be definitely escalating, and Gulf monarchies then had to re-navigate their policymaking towards Yemen. This is the angle of Houthi involvement for Yemen. Another angle is actually, of course, the most critically and globally critical one is their power, logistic power in the Bab el-Mandeb. As we have seen from the 7th of October, they are easily targeting any logistic transportation from Bab el-Mandeb because they are able to do it militarily. Iran is supporting them in terms of intelligence, in terms of their airstrikes, etc. If they aim to do the same now with Bab el-Mandeb, then they will definitely block the entire oil transportation from Yanbu, which is like 10% of Saudi oil, to Suez Canal. This will bring a secondary but a very important challenge to Saudi oil market, because then there will be no way to transport the oil and no way to bring goods to Saudi market and to the Gulf, the other parts of the Gulf as well. So they are quite aware of their logistic power. And I believe, because they are not completely independent political actors, they are completely dependent on Iranian geopolitical interest. They will not use this for the benefit of Yemen or the Yemeni peace, so-called Yemeni peace, but for the Iranian interests, which will bring further desecuritization in Gulf and in Yemen. And as we know, Houthis are not very recognized independent diplomatic actors who are going to talk to them to end this, because before they didn't negotiate properly with the United Nations. As I mentioned before, they were able to talk to Saudis, but what if now they completely changed their face towards Iran? So involvement of Houthis are bringing another threshold, another problem to the war, and it is a way for Iran to show to the world and to Gulf geopolitically it has advantages, and they are able to use all these advantages for their benefits. I think I will stop here and we can continue with the Q&A session.
Fascinating. Thank you very much for being in the within the time limit also, and thank you also for acknowledging especially the fact that the role of post-October 7 security situation, geopolitical situation in the region, and how Israel is benefiting from this insecurity actually in the region. And we have now concluded our first phase of this panel. We are moving on to the Q&A session. And I would like to start with Dr. Ali Bekir. Dr. Ali, building on your very insightful presentation, I'd like to ask you how Gulf countries compensate for their weaknesses and unpreparedness during this period of conflict. Do you see the solution in increased dialogue and diplomacy, or more decisive military posturing? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, nobody is seeking an escalation in this situation. Everybody knows the costs. There have been significant costs up until now reflected on the GCC countries. So I think everybody will try to seek an exit for this war. Having said this, all regional actors, in my opinion, will have to revisit their security beliefs and grand security strategies, because none of these actually worked as we see at the current moment. For example, the Iranians, for so long, for over 3 or 4 decades, they have been banking totally on the so-called forward defense strategy, which is based mainly on their proxies in the region. But once these proxies were degraded and weakened in the last couple of years, we saw that Iran had no second line of defense, and it was very much weakened by the Israelis. Also, the GCC countries, their main security strategy is based on the alliance with the US and the US military bases. This also didn't work, as we can see right now. It seemed that these bases needed someone to defend them rather than they defend the GCC countries. A situation that is really very confusing. Also, probably they calculated that if Iran would move to close Strait of Hormuz, then the US would not allow this to happen. But we can see that this didn't work also. When it comes to Turkey, the Turks have been also working lately, just before the war erupted, to establish a kind of regional alliance that would stabilize the region and prioritize the interests of the regional countries rather than foreign powers. While there have been advancement on that level, the war came to shatter these efforts. And one main reason might be for this war to come at the current moment is to actually sabotage this Turkish attempt, because as we, I mean, rightly know, following October 7, the Israelis are not benefiting from the regional developments. They are driving the regional developments. They are trying to hit every center of power in the region that would stand in their way for hegemony. And that's why, after breaking the resistance, they moved forward, and now they ultimately would weaken Iran to a significant level that the Iranians would, I mean, if we are speaking from a positive point of view, they would have years and years to focus on themselves rather than to focus on the regional foreign policy. And also, the Gulf countries, which were shining just before the moment, are now under heavy losses financially, security wise, defenses, and they have to think about their economic model, about their security alliances, about their political also alignments in the region. So I think that ambiguity is the one that prevailing at the current moment. And let me tell you that I am not optimistic about a resolution also, because while there are indirect talks at the current moment between the Iranians and the Americans with the help of the Pakistanis and the Turks and, of course, the Saudis and the Egyptians, the Americans are also preparing the other option, which is potentially invasion of or taking Hajj Island, or trying to put boots on the ground in Iran. And the Iranians also, because of the Iranians, we should also highlight this. Yes, there have been an aggression by the Israelis and the Americans against the Iranians, but the Iranians lost many opportunities to strengthen their relations with the regional countries and try to, prevent such war from happening. And they have to bear the responsibility also. Many countries sincerely approached them, especially after 2025, to try to, bring them to a kind of a regional understanding. However, because of the late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, he was, persistent on following his old doctrine, which is basically based on the proxies. It didn't work. It didn't work. So I mean, everybody will have to recalculate the security situation following this war, and I'm not seeing. Hopefully, this would be a waking call, like Professor Mahmoud said, to work together in order to, build what has been destroyed up until now. But let's see how things will go forward.
Thank you, Doctor, for this insightful remarks. Actually, most of the people that I talk to, they are not optimistic like you yourself, and including me. You rightfully pointed out the mistakes on various sides, and including the Iranian side also, and the late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, as you said, was very persistent on this proxy warfare issue. But now we have another issues, probably, most probably because the new uh, people that substitute the old ones, the deceased ones, are now more radicalized. They are hardliners, and they are now occupying the power positions in Iran. And most likely, we will not see uh, an Iran which softened its tone and approach. So it will probably create another layer of problems, especially if the Strait of Hormuz issue is solved according to Iran's maximalist demands now, because since they have some kind of strategic advantage over the strait, they are demanding a new status, and this new status, Iran will be equipped with more advantageous economic and military tools and position. So I think we are not going to see like a moderate Iran after this war. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, and I wish to be wrong, but we will see, I believe, another set of problems probably will be arising from that issue. So now I'd like to turn to Professor Babut. Maybe we could have some, positive, optimistic inspirations from his response. Professor Babut, I'd like to ask you, if the war ends now, what steps should be taken to ensure that the similar conflicts don't happen again? And most importantly, maybe, how can trust be rebuilt between the Gulf states and Iran in the aftermath? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you for the question, and also I totally agree with what you've mentioned, and and my colleagues' pessimism about the where this war is going. I think we are still in the process of escalation, despite the some talks about negotiations directly or indirectly. And I think it will. I don't think any of the parties have yet reached the level where the pain is enough for them to to think about de-escalation. So I think everyone is still in that process of escalating to see who's going to blink first. And Iran, obviously, there is. The United States and Israel can demonstrate a lot of power, and we know that. But also Iran, thinks that it can display a lot of resilience, and also to create havoc in the region that have international implication, because they see this as an existential threat, and they don't mind, going all the way for it to protect themselves. So now, when the pain is enough, and the parties are ready to talk, I think it's going to be not an easy one, because now we don't have one player or one party. We have three main players, that is the United States, Israel, and Iran. But also now we have the Houthis who are getting involved, and obviously, although they are aligned with Iran, but still, this is another party. And you have the Gulf states who are involved now, become a victim of all of this, and taking the brunt of this war. more missiles have been fired at and drones at Gulf states rather than Israel, for example. So I think there's going to be a recalculation, a recalibration of the relationship. We need to understand, the basis of the foundation for security that I think Bitol mentioned, Dr. Bitol, that they were relying on foreign security guarantee, and also because of their reliance also on and they're comfortable with the fact that they are important for the global economy, that no one is going to attack them. And also they were reliant on their diplomacy and neutrality, you could say strategic hedging that they were playing for a while. So I think this is all collapsed now, and we need the new paradigm and a paradigm shift to see it further. So we can't return to the status quo. It's definitely not going to happen. But I can see that mediation will remain because that is an important issue. But I think there are 4 pillars that the Gulf states can work on. One is they need to have a collective security infrastructure, for their defense, to defend their infrastructure, especially their critical infrastructure. That is important because the Gulf states are exposed when it comes to their infrastructure, whether it is oil and gas, but also we know that how dependent the Gulf states are on desalination and water treatment and water desalination, and also on their energy. So those things, and also their logistics, ports and airports, etc. So they need to develop some kind of a mechanism to protect this, that is not just on a bilateral basis, but also on a collective manner. The other thing they need to, I could see that will happen sooner or later, is the need for more cooperation and more coordination when it comes to maritime security. As has been mentioned by my colleagues, you have the Strait of Hormuz, but also Bab el-Mandeb, and they are both 2 critical choke points. And the Gulf states will need to work with their partners as well to ensure that there is a maritime security arrangement in place and a mechanism. And I think they will need some kind of a crisis communication where, if there is a crisis, again, what kind of mechanisms do we have in place to be able to communicate with Iran or with other countries in the region to to de-escalate or downscale any and avoid any conflict. And last but not least, they have to diversify their security arrangements, but with dependable partners. Because what has happened is that the current partners were not dependable. In fact, if anything, they were one of the causes of this war, and one of the causes why the Gulf states have been attacked. So they will need to do so, and I believe in for them to be able to do so is one to have diversified relationship with other global powers, but that is in itself is not enough. I think what they need is much more collaboration at the regional level, where you have a regional mechanism that includes not only the Gulf states, but other willing countries like, some Arab countries, Turkey, Pakistan, and other countries that want to play a role in this strategic region. And I think this is something that's been on the agenda for a long time. where you have some kind of regional mechanism, but it hasn't moved further because of certain misunderstandings in the past, etc. But I believe what has happened now and the war and the consequences and the threat that the Gulf states have been subjected to will get them to think seriously about creating this regional mechanism to protect their sovereignty, to protect their security, and also to be able to serve the global economy, because as been explained by my colleagues, the global economy is very dependent on this region for on energy, and also these countries in the Gulf are also dependent on the global economy and the well-being of the global economy to be able to sell their oil and gas, because as we know, most of them, their economies is highly dependent on hydrocarbon exports. So I think there is a lot to be talked about after this, and I said it will not be the same. The status quo has shown that it cannot continue. Neutrality, strategic hedging are important, but not sufficient on their own. They need to develop some kind of a deterrence, and that deterrence not necessarily just buying more arms and so on, but or getting more U.S. Involvement in the region. But I think that deterrence should come from some kind of a regional security structure that is more inclusive and not exclusive as it is now. I'll stop here if you like.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your valuable contribution. I think now we can, move to our last speaker, and I'd like to ask her one more question, Dr. Betül Doğan Akkaş. I want to bring the Turkish dimension, and Turkey is one of the key actors in this equation, and given its unique position, how do you evaluate Ankara's management of this crisis so far? Has it been effective in preventing a wider conflict in the region? And actually, how do you describe Turkey's strategy with regard to this conflict, and what additional steps could Turkey take to mitigate this conflict? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa, for bringing this up. I think Ali mentioned a very critical point about it, and I want to start with his points. He said there could be a sabotage to Turkish intervention, a diplomatic intervention by Turkey, because now this is the only thing we have in our hands. Diplomatically, Gulf monarchies have been working very hard for the peace across the Africa, Middle East, even in the Ukraine war, we have Gulf monarchies involved to reach a peaceful solution as quickly as possible. Now the war is at the hand of Gulf monarchies, and this is not something they picked. This is not something they actually signed for. So this is why we need other countries involved and working for the sake of Gulf security. And I think Turkey is now is a reliable partner. And I said this before in many different occasions. Although there could be certain conflicts of interest between Gulf capitals and Ankara, they actually share something very big and very important. They would like to see a stable Middle East, regardless of who governs where or which purpose is for the interest of each Gulf states or Ankara. They would like to see a general peace in the Middle East, because once you're not secure in Syria or in Doha or in Riyadh, this definitely have an impact on other Middle East capitals. And we see this in the last 4 or 5 decades. This is something already proved itself. In terms of Turkish role, I think it's very constructive, and I am very glad to say, as a Gulf expert, that This is not something like Ankara is picking a winner or picking a side in the Gulf security. It's functioning for a bigger picture. Now we see the foreign minister is working for to prevent any attack to any Gulf capital, and also to assure that there won't be any further civilian infrastructural damage in Iran, and there won't be any further issues happening in Gaza due to that tension. So I think it's a very triple. It has a triple dynamics in terms of Turkish foreign policy. This is important, but also very elusive, because as we mentioned previously, these monarchies, and Dr. Abdullah mentioned, they are actually known for their diplomatic power. They do a lot of in terms of their diplomatic capital. They have a lot of in terms of their negotiations. Even Oman or Qatar itself, they did a lot of effort for the regional peace. And even now they are the victim of this situation. They are trying very hard to handle it. This is why Turkish power is important in terms of reminding to the world that these are the states quite peaceful, and their only existence in the world is actually supporting peace or economic stability in the world. We don't see their aggression other parts of the world. Of course, we have critiques over the Emirati investment or their involvement in Sudan, in Libya, but these are minor considering overall Gulf picture, Gulf diplomatic profile in the world politics, and this is very important. In terms of Turkish role, it is more like it has a broader picture, as I mentioned before, but it is also not very backed by other European or American lobbies or power actors that have enough power to invest in. Because I think, again, we are going back to idea that Israeli insecurity runs the Middle East now. It's not the opposite. This is why, although Turkey is working hard on this, we don't see this globally acknowledged enough or supported enough. What we understood from the narrative of Turkish Foreign Ministry, they talk to US, they talk to Iran, they are trying to reach a common ground between the parties, but the priority is to keep Gulf secure from the airstrikes. And since today Fidan is in Doha, we don't see any further attack in Doha. He also visited Turkish military base, because Turkey itself involved militarily with the Gulf security. Although the percentage of Turkish share in the Gulf armament is very limited considering the US or European involvement, they do have investments in the Gulf. They do have joint production stages with Saudi Arabia is now on the table. So Turkey is actually a very active partner in Gulf security. I think this is a very key, but also very elusive diplomatic situation. And I believe this is the only option for the peace now, other than Trump changes his mind out of a sudden. He is now going back to being a real ally of Gulf. Then I think this is the only solution at the moment. But as I mentioned, it's elusive, but it will also affect the post-war scenarios, because Turkey shares a border with Iran and Iraq as well. So any insecurity coming to these lands are also part of Turkish potential insecurity. So this is an issue. But also Turkey is not there. There has been questions like as if it is possible to replace US security hegemony in the Gulf. The questions were coming like, can we have Russia or China or Turkey instead of US? We will definitely see more external powers, diversification of military security, or as Babut mentioned, more collective attempts from Gulf monarchies, but it is not going to completely change the US security authority in the Gulf. We will see more like Turkey involved in bigger shares of military defense sector or armament of the Gulf monarchies. But as a general picture, what I see from the current stage of the war, if Turkey can sign a deal between these parties or reach a ceasefire, it will prove its diplomatic capital in the regional politics. Again, it's elusive, but this is what Turkish foreign policy is in attempt, as I understand, in the last week. And this is also, of course, affecting the overall global market, energy market. So this will definitely redefine the security framework of the Gulf. If Iran is not able to finish this for its sake, or if energy market is not able to bring an end to this situation, and Gulf diplomacy is not working because they are already calling for de-escalation since day one, then who will end this war? As we have seen, US is not literally working for the Gulf security. So in this very complex, very difficult situation, I believe any potential peace process might function for the sake of Gulf monarchies, and I think Turkey can really reprove its role in the Gulf security complex.
The alternative would be a greater Israel if they don't work together as a collective regional countries.
Yes, very, very important warning. Certainly. So thank you, Betül, for this really insightful response. And I agree with you about the role of Turkey is playing positively in, mitigating this conflict, preventing this from, spreading the wider region. This is really important. And to me, actually, it's the last hope for a peaceful political solution for this ongoing, um, unreasonable, highly destructive, unjustified conflict. So let's hope Turkey continue to play this important and constructive role. So I'd like to ask you, esteemed speakers, if you have any additional comment we can have, or if not, we can conclude here. I think okay. So thank you. This has been truly enlightening and timely discussion. Today, we have explored the profound shift in Gulf security through the lenses of regional politics, security architecture, maritime geopolitics. It's clear that as the dynamics between Iran, the US, and Israel continue to evolve, the strategic landscape of Gulf will require both a resilient security framework and also persistent diplomatic engagement. So I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to our speakers, Abdullah, Ali, Betül. Thank you for your valuable contribution. And I also want to thank our audience for their participation. Thank you all for joining us today. This concludes our panel, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.